Welcome to EJB Talks, Rutgers Blaustein School experts in policy, planning, and health, where we talk with our faculty and staff experts, as well as students, about how the fields of public policy, urban planning, public health, health administration, and public and urban informatics affect your lives. Welcome to another episode of EJB Talks. I'm Stuart Shapiro, the Associate Dean of Faculty at the Blaustein School, and the purpose of this podcast is to talk with my colleagues about issues affecting people in New Jersey, the United States, and the world. In our last episode, we talked about the effects of COVID-19 and the economic dislocation on urban design. Today, we turn to another related field that's covered by our highly ranked urban planning program, transportation. I'm talking to my colleague, Professor Bob Noland. Bob, can you tell us about the areas of transportation you study?
Well, thank you, Stuart. So I study a lot of different areas of transportation, probably a lot of it boiling down to travel behavior, economic impacts, environmental impacts, safety impacts. A lot of our work is really just applied statistics, applying statistical models to understand transportation behavior.
Great. So turning to COVID-19 and these crazy times we're going through right now, it's hit hardest in our cities. And one of the areas most affected will be public transit, where people crowd together. I know hundreds of thousands of people take the New York City subways every day. Do you think people are going to return to public transit after all this is over?
Well, that's a very good question. I suppose there are always some people who have no option other than take public transit. That's probably especially true in New York City, which is very dependent on their public transit system, especially the subway. So the question is, will those people who have a choice, will they decide to drive or will they take transit? And I think we really don't know whether people will be comfortable on that. It really depends on what sort of practices the transit agencies follow and such. I will say that this is all going to be very difficult to figure out because the first thing that's happening is we're going to have a major economic recession, and that's going to reduce use of public transit regardless of people's reaction or their fear of using public transit.
Right. And we're also going through a crashing of the gas prices, both on the part of that is COVID-related demand, but part of that is supply side issues. If that lasts, that's also going to affect the decisions about how people move from place to place, right?
Yeah, that probably would. Again, for those who have a choice, they may realize that driving is cheaper now, and also, if there's a recession, we won't see as much traffic congestion. So they may be more likely to drive relative to taking transit. The more worrisome concern there is that people will make decisions on what type of vehicle to purchase when they make their next purchase, and they will not get as efficient a vehicle. We were already, gasoline was already cheap before this crisis at about $50 a barrel or so. And we were already seeing a trend towards people buying larger vehicles. And given that our fuel economy regulations and are set by vehicle class, that was actually not a good thing. It was increasing our CO2 emissions. Never mind what the Trump administration trying to dismantle all our policies to try to reduce carbon emissions, but this was still an effect that was happening.
Right. I mean, from what you're saying, it sounds to me we've been hearing about sort of how the return to work is going to fuel inequality. That people will have to go back to work that can't work remotely, and others will be able to work from home, like you and I. It sounds like the transportation differential will also fuel inequality here. The people that have to use public transit will crowd together in the trains, and those of us that don't have to will be freed from that burden.
That's a possible outcome, I think. So it's really dependent on the transit agencies doing their best to, have certain requirements, people wearing masks, people having Making sure the trains and the stations are not crowded, by just letting a certain amount of people in. Of course, that's going to delay their trip potentially if there's a lot of demand. Uh, I really don't know how that's going to be handled. The obvious solution is we get a vaccine out there, and we don't have to worry as much, I hope, about this. But there may be some residual fear of crowded spaces.
Yeah, I think it's human behavior and human psychology indicates that there certainly might be. I mean, I go into the city and I think about whether I would drive or take New Jersey Transit. And for the near future, I plan on driving.
Okay.
um, Despite my care for the
But
environment, despite all of that.
I
Um,
mean, the trains are probably empty now. The trains going into Manhattan.
that's true. Of course, I'm
So
not going right now. I'll be
right.
going in a month or two. Um, right. Now, what about the fact that everything we've learned about working remotely and shopping remotely, how do you think that's going to affect transportation decisions?
So that's an interesting one. People have been talking about working at home, telecommuting, whatever you want to call it, for 35, 40 years. Um, and, what the research has shown is that this is kind of people might work at home part of the time, and it's kind of a transient phenomenon. It's not like someone makes a decision, well, I'm just going to keep working at home from now on. So there's been a small percent of the population that's, working at home some of the time. It's certainly, my experience is it's certainly feasible. It saves me a couple hours a day in commute time. It also makes me go a little bit bonkers at times because I don't get outside as much. Uh, and uh, it's those people, and this would, of course, change once schools and childcare reopens. It's those people that have children in the household that they have to look after now who are really distracted, and it's difficult to work at home. But there are other distractions, the dog barking, um, the lawn care people who come out and start, mowing the lawn or blowing leaves or whatever. It's a little bit actually noisier than being in the office at times. And so there are these little annoyances that you don't think about um, when you don't do it. And so, the other issue is I think employers are going to have a decision to make is, a lot of employers would love to not have to lease or buy as much office space. It would give them a big cost savings. On the other hand, how comfortable do they feel with all this working at home? Is it affecting their productivity? Is it affecting the ability to communicate? To have water cooler conversations and such that can pass information along. And these are unknowns as to it's going to vary by industry how important these other effects are. But we've known for a long time that clustering people at a work site or in an area can increase productivity. Again, I don't know how that will be viewed.
Right. I know at Blaustein we've started to begin thinking a lot about the future of work, and clearly the future of work and affects the future of transportation and the future of our social classes as well.
You also asked about online services.
Right.
I think we all have a story to tell about trying to order groceries or other items online right now. Uh, I was talking to one of our PhD students, ordering from Walmart, and so he got some cat litter that he didn't order. So if anyone would like some, I'll give you his name. But clearly these companies are struggling right now, so it's not the best example of efficient services. But I don't know how that'll play out. It's certainly more expensive, I think, than going to the store. Um, it's going to be a decision that people make in the future, and some people may be turned off by how inefficient it is right now. So again, a big unknown there as to how much it will increase.
Right. I mean, I would imagine that online delivery services are learning from this experience. I mean, that they're probably going to get better.
Um, Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it could go any of a number of directions. Switching gears a little bit. The aviation industry has been perhaps the most affected by COVID-19 outside of probably hotels and hospitality. Um, what do you see for the future of aviation? Will it come back? Will people start flying again?
That's a very good question. I think again, part of it will be determined by how the airlines and the airports manage their crowding. I don't think anyone would feel comfortable getting on a crowded plane right now. Most of them are flying empty or very empty.
Yeah.
So again, I would be reluctant to fly again until there's a vaccine in place.
Yeah.
Um, I would imagine that when that does happen, there's enough demand for travel, for long distance travel and tourist travel, that the airlines will probably recover. Um,
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it also right now, I think fresh in our mind is the fact that almost certainly air travel was a key vector of spreading this disease around the globe, and people aren't going to forget that too quickly.
people have always been concerned. They say, "Oh, I flew, cross country on a plane, and I got home, I got sick," or
Right.
flying, across Atlantic or something. So there's always, especially in the wintertime, that concern about picking something up on a flight, and better air circulation, which eats up more fuel, by the way, can maybe help alleviate some of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. As with the transit, there's certain choices private entities or state and local entities could make to mitigate these effects, and it'll be interesting to see whether or not they do so.
Well, most of them will cost them money, and
Yep.
knowing how our economy works, they probably won't, at least not in the
Yeah.
long run.
And of course, that's where policy could step in, and we could require some of these changes, at least in the short term, as people gain more confidence in using transportation again.
We could, yes.
Um, all of these things impact the burning of fossil fuel, the decision whether or not to drive to work, the decision whether to drive or take public transit, or bike or walk, the decision to fly. And of course, burning fossil fuels is a key contributor to climate change. Do you think the changes taken in whole are likely to help or hurt the fight to curb
Uh,
global warming?
Again, good question. I'm going to guess it probably won't make any difference.
Uh huh.
Um, maybe a few more people will work at home, but then if you have fewer people using transit and driving instead, it's all going to balance out. Um, the interesting thing I've observed is you see more people walking, and obviously they're walking around their neighborhood to try to, get out of the house because they've been stuck in the house, and there's nowhere to go if they get in their car. Um, so I keep thinking, people are actually discovering walking. They're discovering their neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they will, walk more for exercise. I don't know if it's going to affect their walking for trips and actual activities, because most people don't live in neighborhoods where they could actually walk somewhere. But it might give people a sense of distance. We kind of know that people have a very bad sense of distance. If you say, "Oh, it's only a 1 mile walk away," most people would think that's unwalkable. And yet it's only a 20-minute walk or so. Um, so people's perceptions may change, at least in the short run. Um, so I don't know how that will play out.
Right. Right. Um, what are the biggest changes that you see in transportation going forward as a result of everything we're going through right now?
Well, the big change is going to be the big revenue hit to public transit right now.
Mm-hmm.
So not only are they not getting their fare income, and obviously a lot of them have cut service uh, because no one's using the service. Um, New Jersey Transit went to a weekend schedule, um, at least for the trains.
Right.
I don't know. The bigger hit will come from the lack of state support because the state budgets have been hit. Uh, a lot of, not in New Jersey, but a lot of states They have a sales tax base for their transit.
Uh,
So all of this has been hit, obviously, and there will be some recovery of that as people, as things open up eventually. But the recession that's coming will also affect that. So, without support to maintain these systems, there's going to be reductions in service, basically.
right, and it's not like New Jersey Transit wasn't already in need of significant infrastructure improvements before this started.
Yeah, well, that's the capital expenses are usually different, distinct from the operating expenses. But
Okay.
yes, that's going to be um, to some extent, it would be an opportunity to do some of those major capital improvements if you have fewer people using the system. Uh, but these projects take a while to plan.
Right, right. Anything else you'd like to get in about transportation before we sign off?
Um, yeah, I guess. I mean, the other issues you were mentioning how airlines have possibly been a vector for spreading the virus, and clearly from coming in from other countries and such, and that's been the case. And even travel within this country, that's been the case. Um, there's been some debate: is public transit a vector also by having the
Right.
crowding? And there's been quite a debate about that in New York City, for example. I don't think that's been determined yet. We're trying to do a little analysis to kind of look at those issues.
Mm,
Our results suggest, public transit probably did make things worse,
right.
but it's probably a small effect. But uh, driving also seems to give a positive effect also. So just having more mobility maybe have led to passing the virus on. Hard
Right.
to say for sure now. I think once all the data is in place, we'll have a better idea. What's great about this right now, there are all these open data sources being updated in real time. So it gives us some ability to analyze these things quite quickly. Um,
Yeah.
I wish there were more data because not some of it's not really appropriate for what we're trying to do, but it's suggestive of these sort of effects.
That's interesting. The idea that mobility and us, our presence as a mobile society, means also the virus can travel very easily.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, when you get done with that analysis, we can have you back on and talk some more about what you find there.
Okay.
In the meantime, a big thank you to Professor Noland for coming on today. Thanks, Bob.
All right. Thank you, Stuart.
And I'd also like to thank, as always, our production team, Tamara Swedberg, Amy Cobb, and Karen Olson. We'll be back next week with another talk with another expert from the Blaustein School. Thanks for listening.